following program is exclusively produced and distributed by Dick Dinman's Double D Productions, Inc., all rights reserved. Hi, Golden Age film fanatics, and welcome to DVD Classics Corner on the Air. My name is Dick Dinman, and our goal is to become your exclusive guide to the very best of the Golden Age classics coming out on DVD. We'll have reviews, breaking news of upcoming releases, plenty of surprise guests, and a special feature devoted to the great Golden Age film composers, which we call Cinemusic. So let's turn on the marquee and lights, camera, action. It's time for Dick's Picks, in which I get to shine the spotlight on one of my Dick's Picks of the week. This month, our friends at Kino Lorber are paying tribute to the incredible versatility of Golden Age screen icon Edward G. Robinson. No less than 3 Robinson classics are included in their film noir, The Dark Side of Cinema No. 17, which includes Vice Squad, in which Robinson plays a captain of detectives trying to thwart a bank robbery. Nightmare, in which Robinson helps his brother-in-law make sense of a terrible dream in which he murders a mysterious man. And Black Tuesday, in which Robinson is at his snarling, savage best as a violent killer who busts out of prison and takes hostages. But to my mind, the greatest of these Robinson classics is Kino Lorber's separate release of Fritz Lang's masterwork Scarlet Street, in a stunning new 4K restoration in which Robinson brilliantly portrays a middle-aged milquetoast who plunges into a whirlpool of lust, revenge, and murder. I know that after you see Kino Lorber's Film Noir Collection No. 17 and the 4K restoration of Scarlet Street, you'll agree with me that Edward G. Robinson is the most versatile actor of his generation. Stay tuned for more Dick's Picks, coming up on DVD Classics Corner on the Air very soon.
Eddie G. Robinson came in, and I made a friendship with Eddie, which was until he died. He acted with nothing but his eyes and his cigar.
He almost walked away with what he did was so subtle.
Oh, it was just absolute. Those eyes of his, I'll never forget them. The whole thing at the table was just eyes with him.
That was Oscar winner Karl Malden, one of my first guests on DVD Classics Corner on the Air, talking about one of the greatest film actors of the 20th century, Edward G. Robinson.
Ladies and gentlemen, appearing this way in person breaks one of my long-standing traditions. Most of my screen career has been concerned with portraying lawbreakers, at least ever since by a quaint twist of fate I was cast as Little Caesar. Well, it was all a lot of fun and very pleasant up to a certain point. After a while, I became so imbued with the ruthlessness of these characters that I got to believing that I myself was really tough. Yes, and then again, my sleep wasn't any too restful. Why, one night I got up and found myself strangling my wife. A lovely girl. And I was shouting at her, "Look here, this bed ain't big enough for both of us. One of us has got to go, and it ain't going to be me." Yeah. Well, what was all the fighting for in the old gangster pictures? Territory. I want to tell you, you're telling me nothing. I ain't going to any federal pen. There isn't one big enough to hold your Prozac.
Now, I'll be celebrating this versatility with no less than 3 of Robinson's talented female co-stars, Margaret O'Brien, Kathleen Hughes, and returning for the 5th time on my show, Gena Rowlands. Let's kick off this Robinson celebration with Margaret O'Brien, who co-starred with him in Our Vines Have Tender Grapes. In the entire history of motion pictures, there were only two astronomically talented child actresses whose name alone on marquees could guarantee massive audience attendance. In the 30s, of course, there was Shirley Temple, but in the 40s, there was Margaret O'Brien, and I couldn't be more elated than I am to have her as a guest on my show for the very first time. Margaret O'Brien, welcome to DVD Classics Corner on the Air. It is wonderful to have you here. I have to tell you that I saw a film that I haven't seen in more years than I care to mention. It's a film called Our Vines Have Tender Grapes. And what's especially amazing to me is the incredible chemistry and rapport that comes off the screen when you two are doing scenes together. You know,
well, this was one of his, he has always said, his favorite movies that he did, because it was such a different character for him. The Norwegian farmer and the simple man, and with a child and growing up. And he was wonderful in it. I mean, he was absolutely fabulous, because he was such a fabulous actor. But it was quite a departure as far as, in the studios, the different studios' eyes, they always saw him as the gangster, or they never thought of him that playing this type of role. So he was very grateful and happy to MGM to have thought of him for this film, and it's quite amazing because that Mr. Mayer did think of him for this film, because normally he was not thought of for this type of a role. This was one of his favorites, and he thought one of his best performances.
When you think that a man of this incredible range and versatility and power and warmth never was nominated for an Academy Award.
There were some great actors that were never nominated, and
yes.
no, it's amazing to me.
How was it to work with Edward G. Robinson?
He was fabulous to work with. He was the nicest man, and we became very good friends. And he was very good friends with my mother and my family, and we would see him throughout the years. And then, he had one son.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I know.
A very handsome son. And my mother would try to help the son a little bit because he had some problems. And Edward G. Robinson was always very concerned about his son. And it was a shame.
It was.
Because his son was talented, but he never could quite pull himself together. And not because of Edward G. Robinson. He really, was concerned, and my mother would call him up and say, your son is here, and he's had a little too much to drink, and he'd come by and pick him up, and it was kind of a sad situation. But it just didn't work out, unfortunately. And I think that was a very sad part of his life, because he was rather an upbeat person as far as I know, working with him. He was very sweet and wonderful to work with, and a happy person. He was not a person that was ever cranky on the set, or ever got angry. He was a very serene, easygoing person to work with. Very caring, and would take direction, didn't speak up and say, well, I will do it my way, or anything like that. He just, and worked with his fellow actors. So from my experience, he was a very nice, very wonderful person, and, did try to really help his son and so forth. So I have only, good things to say about working with. So it was such a pleasure, doing the film and making the film, and it was such a wonderful story. And, it really goes right along with today of growing up and your parents realizing you're growing at the end when he says, well, you're growing too, with all the land.
That wonderful, wonderful scene where you're walking hand in hand.
Yes, and he says, you're growing too, along with my land and my farm.
Trees are blossoming.
Pussy willow, too.
Grass is growing.
Pa, I'm growing, too.
Yes, Anthony. We're all growing.
And then there's, of course, the wonderful scene where, I'm acting kind of naughty, and I take this, Butcher Jenkins, a little boy, skate, and he has to discipline me, and he hates to do it.
Give him the skates, Yentami.
No.
Unless you give him the skates, you'll have to go to bed right now without any supper.
I'm taking my skates, and I'm going to bed without any supper.
Selma, give me those skates.
You said if I went to bed without any supper, I didn't have to give him a turn.
You don't have to give him a turn. Now you have to give him the skates. Here, little Arnold. These are your skates. Selma wants you to have them as a present. Don't you, Selma?
Yes.
That is your punishment for selfishness. Now go to your room and go to bed.
And then he feels so badly that he realizes a circus is in town, and he doesn't have a lot of money, but he pays the circus man to let me ride the elephant and takes me out in the night to see the circus when it's not performing. That's a wonderful scene, father-daughter.
That's my favorite scene in the entire film.
I love that, too, because as a child, I love the circus, you know.
Yes.
So that was one of my favorite scenes.
You could go from unrepentant evil to the polar opposite, and the polar opposite, of course, is on the lines of Tender Grace.
Yes.
And I am so grateful that you've spent this time, and I will run amok if I cannot do within a few weeks, at the most a month, an entire show devoted to you, because you have so much to contribute.
Thank you.
Margaret, you are so delightful, and I am very grateful for you spending the time.
And I enjoyed your wonderful at interviews. You are fabulous.
Oh,
so it was very easy doing the interview with you.
We pause now for station identification.
DVD Classics Corner on the Air is exclusively produced and released by Dick Dinman's Double D Productions, Inc. All rights reserved.
You're right where you belong, fooling with your little details. And that's where you'll always be. And that's why it's such a pleasure waving you goodbye.
You're not leaving.
You're hurting me.
Starring Edward G. Robinson, who hated Paula, but so did plenty of others. And tantalizing Kathleen Hughes, Hollywood's new discovery. The 3D sensation of It Came from Outer Space.
You don't own me, you know.
No, I don't. Just don't ever hurt me, Paula.
Those were clips of the trailer for the suspense film The Glass Web. And that bad lady you just heard being so mean to Edward G. is in reality one of the nicest ladies you'll find anywhere. Her name is Kathleen Hughes, who I'm proud to say is one of my closest friends, and she's about to shed the light on a particular talent that Edward G. had, which few are aware of. Kathleen Hughes Rubin, welcome to DVD Classics Corner on the Air. It's wonderful to have you as a guest, and what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about one of your most prominent co-stars, Edward G. Robinson.
Wonderful.
Now, you did a film called The Glass Web. You co-starred with Edward G. Robinson in The Glass Web, And this was your second film for, I think, for director Jack Arnold. Am I correct?
Yes, yes.
And it was also your second 3D movie.
Yes, I was Miss 3D of 1953 or maybe 1952. I love 3D.
You didn't have to mention the year.
Well, you can cut it out.
Tell me about your experience working with Edward G. Robinson.
Well, it was just one of the best experiences ever. Of course, I was a big fan of his. I had seen so many of his movies and loved him in all of them. And then when I got to meet him, he was so nice. He was just a joy to work with. He was very nurturing. There was a scene where I had to laugh, but, laughing at him. And I found this very difficult. And I said, well, I'm not quite sure how to do this so that it's not going to sound phony. And he showed me how. I mean, it's, over 50 years since he showed me, but it was just a sort of a breath thing. And he did it for me, and it was very, very helpful. Huh. And I thought that was really nice of him.
The rumor is that he was a great kisser. Is this true or is this false?
Oh, no, that is true. I was hoping you would bring it up. I would have brought it up eventually.
Do tell.
I don't know how this came about, but between takes and between scenes, we would sometimes sort of neck in his dressing room on the set.
Whoa.
Now, I must say, the door was open, so, nobody could say that anything too X-rated was going on in there. But he was just so sweet, and it was just like a couple of teenagers kissing. And I loved it. It was just wonderful. He was just such a wonderful actor, and he gave so much. So it was really, really easy, and it was a joy working with him. I mean, I never worried about any of the scenes. I must say, it was hard to look disgusted when he touched me, which I had to do. But it was also fun having to do this because of how much I liked him.
Any other reflections on Edward G. Robinson that...
I'll tell you something that was really, really nice. When the picture was over, or as it was coming to the end of the shoot, again, I can't remember for sure, but he invited the entire cast and crew to his house for dinner. And it was a lovely, lovely dinner party, and we got to tour his art gallery, and we got to tour the house. And I thought that was a really nice thing for him to do. It was a wonderful evening.
I'm very grateful, Kathleen, so grateful for you to appear on the show with me. We've been friends now for at least X amount of years.
Yeah, you're right.
And I'm so glad we finally got together on this show, and much love to you and Stanley.
Oh, well, thank you, and it was a pleasure talking to you, and I love talking about Edward G. Robinson.
Well, and I love listening. Thanks again. And finally, my last guest is the multi-award-winning and mega-talented Gena Rowlands, who remains a favorite of DVD Classics Corner on the air listeners every single time she graciously acquiesces to honor us with a visit. Can we talk a little about Edward G. Robinson?
Yes.
You played 477 performances.
I know.
Of Paddy Chayefsky's wonderful play, Middle of the Night. So you must have gotten to know this man very, very well. Putting that in its proper perspective, I think this was your first major Broadway role, am I right?
Yes. Yes, I had played
smaller parts and different things, but that was my first major role.
What was your first contact with Edward G. Robinson once you'd gotten the role?
I just remember us all being there to start the rehearsals, and Edward G. didn't say much at the time, but he didn't have to say much. His persona was so strong. And of course, we'd all seen him in many, many pictures through the years. But he always played such a tough guy. And I was surprised at his extremely gentlemanly manner. He was a very educated man, spoke many languages, and he just had the most beautiful attitude towards people, and he was never tough and rough. He was silk, and I just loved him. And then since we played together so long, and he was, I think he was divorcing his first wife at that time.
Yes, it was a tumultuous time for him because...
It was, and he held it together very, very nicely. And but it must have been very hard because they had to get rid of their art collection.
Yes.
And that meant a lot to him. But then Jane, the woman he married during the show, and I became very good friends, and John, my late husband, and he did. And we saw each other quite a lot, not just on stage. And it was a lovely friendship. And then when John and I came out to Los Angeles after the picture closed.
Let me just interrupt and tell our audience that we're talking about John Cassavetes.
Yes.
Yes.
And so we came out after the play shut down, and we rented a house, and it turned out that it was right across the street from Edward G's. And it was funny. And he was very dear. He just made it his business to introduce us to everybody in Hollywood, and he knew everybody. And it was a lovely friendship, and I miss him very much.
You cannot find anyone who did not like and admire this man.
I would find it hard to believe that anyone didn't like him.
You know, that Middle of the Night was the first theater performance that Edward G. Robinson did since 1930. Since 1930, he had not stepped on a theater stage. Middle of the Night was the very, very first time he'd been on stage since 1930. Did you detect any nervousness at all, or any anxiety?
No. If he had it, he wasn't showing it. And he was. I didn't know it was from 1930, but I knew he was, I believe, 65 or something, which is a long time to go without going on stage. And now he was, he was just magical in the part.
And the play was somewhat controversial because
Yes.
it was the story of a much older man.
Yes.
I think in the play he's 56 or around that, and the girl
Something like that.
The girl is something like 21 years old.
Yes.
How was it approaching that particular problem with him?
Well, it wasn't hard at all, at least from my point of view, and I don't think for his, except that he had all the pressure on him from his family, who were shocked that he would even, go out with a young girl like me in the play. And it was, they really took him over the rocks for it, so that you got to see that very clearly in the play. Whereas I was such a young, neurotic girl who needed someone strong and that loved me, and which my husband in the play didn't. And so it was not hard finding your way along that path.
Did you find the romantic scenes with him unusually challenging?
No, there weren't any really physically. I mean, we weren't kissing and jumping into bed and things like that, which would have been challenging because of the story. But no, everything was very tender, and it wasn't until just the very last part of the play that you realized that he was going to defy his family and go ahead and marry me. So it was mysterious, because half the time you thought, no, he just can't. He just can't. All of his children are mad, and his sisters are mad, you know. But it was it was not a hard thing to imagine.
To tell you how wrong this kind of story could be in the wrong hands. The film, Middle of the Night, frankly, didn't really work. I don't know whether you ever saw the film.
I did. It didn't work.
It didn't
work.
work.
And I don't know why. I didn't. I felt too close to the subject to be able to really tell why. But
well, one of the reasons, I think, may have been the casting, because Frederick March, I think in the first scene, he attempted to play a little bit of the character's Jewishness, but he abandoned it right after the first scene.
He did. Well, that might have been it, because the Jewish humor and stuff was so wonderful in that play.
This, by the way, was originally done on television with E.G. Marshall and I think Ava Marie Saint.
Yes. They wanted Eva to do it on stage, but I think she was having a baby or something that she couldn't do it. That's how I got my foot in the door.
You must have been incredibly thrilled.
I was.
Any final words about Edward G. Robinson? Anything that perhaps we, as the film-going public, would not know that might?
I don't think so. He made so many movies, and you got a chance to see him in so many parts, and I think people just generally love him.
Thank you so much for sharing memories of.
I'm very happy
about this great actor. Well, that's my show for today. DVD Classics Corner on the Air is conceived, written, produced, and directed by me, Double D. And if you'd like to hear some of my older, vintage shows, please go to www.dvdclassicscorner.net, where in addition to the broadcasts, you'll find hundreds of my print reviews of classic DVD releases. So, until next week,
keep well, keep happy, and keep listening.